Well, hello and welcome back to Literacy Volunteers of Harrison County. My name is Dr. Rich Saplita, and we're doing a follow-up for our unit on sleep, and we want to talk more specifically about dreams. What's going on with dreaming? Okay, so both in terms of the brain physiology, the brain function, what's happening there during REM or rapid eye movement sleep that's causing us to dream, but also the more fascinating question that turns out to be also much more difficult to answer: what do our dreams mean? Okay, so we'll start out with the physiology because it's more clear-cut. And so what we see happening in the brain during sleep with the waves, the brain waves, is we see something called PGO waves. And what this stands for, if you remember our overview of brain anatomy, we talked about the pons here in the lower parts of the brain, right? The pons is the P. The G stands for geniculate. That's sort of a weird word. It actually is short for something much longer, the lateral geniculate nucleus of the thalamus. The thalamus is the main relay center in the brain. And then the O stands for the occipital lobe. Okay, the visual parts of the brain here in the back of the head. I put an I here in the front so you'll know that this is the back part of the brain. This is where our conscious experience of vision takes place neurologically. And so what in PGO waves, what you see happening is the pons will spike with activity. There's a burst of activity in the pons, followed by a burst of activity in the lateral geniculate nucleus, followed by a burst of activity in the occipital lobe. And so this is part of the normal, this last link, the GO, is part of the normal system. Like right now, when I'm awake, my eyes are open, information's coming in, it's coming into my eyes, it gets relayed through my optic nerve back to my geniculate nucleus, to the G, and then back to my occipital lobe, and that helps my brain create what I register as visual awareness. But see, when you're asleep, your eyes are closed, and the signal's not coming from your eyes, it's originating here in the pons. But nevertheless, the occipital lobe of the brain, those visual centers are being activated, and so what happens is the rest of the brain is going to try to figure out, is going to try to make some sense out of these signals, and it's going to interpret those as different people, different places, different things happening, okay? And so we call this the activation synthesis hypothesis. The PGO waves activate the visual centers in the brain, and as I mentioned, the rest of the cortex is going to do the best job that it can trying to make some sort of sense out of those signals, okay? The prefrontal cortex, these frontal regions of the brain, we talked about this before, they're associated with like logic and reason, decision making. The PFC, or the prefrontal cortex, has very low metabolic activity during REM sleep. The rest of the brain's very active, the PFC has low activity, and because of this, our dreams follow what we would consider to be very loose narratives. They're kind of flighty. They jump from one topic to the next. Or sometimes in my own dreams, I'm talking to a certain person, okay? And in the next scene, that person like changes into another person. It's the strangest stuff, but in the dream, we just kind of go with the flow because the PFC's not on and it's not worried about detecting errors and things that don't make sense, okay? So dreams tend to lack an overall sense of coherence. Okay. Now, according to this hypothesis, and this personally for me does square with my own experiences, the content of dreams tends to often involve relatively peripheral things or minutia from the previous day. Maybe on the way home from work you got stuck in a traffic jam and there's all of those orange cones there along the highway that we all love, right? Well, your brain might pick up on something that's a minutia like that and find a way to work that into your dream somehow, okay? Especially if that was unusual that day. Okay, according to this hypothesis, and this kind of, I feel like I'm the guy that's telling you that magic's not real, but there's relatively little profound meaning to be discovered in our dreams. And I want to contrast this with, here in the second part, with earlier psychologists like Sigmund Freud. Okay, Sigmund Freud placed a big emphasis on dream analysis. And so we'll talk a little bit here about Freudian dream analysis. To understand this, you've got to understand a little bit about how Freud understood the human mind to work. And so the most common illustration is what we call the iceberg illustration. Okay, so y'all are familiar with icebergs. There's only a little bit of the iceberg that sticks up above the surface of the ocean, right? The main mass of the iceberg is submerged. You can't see it from the surface. So accordingly, Freud said that the conscious mind is like the tip of the iceberg. That's relatively little of our mind, even when we're awake, only a little bit of our mental energy, only a little bit of our psyche is involved with consciousness and conscious awareness. What he says is that most of the mind, most of the human psyche or mind, involves activity happening there on the subconscious or the unconscious level, underneath the surface of awareness. Okay, so according to this theory, Freud says that dreams especially, it's not just dreams, but primarily it's dreams, serve as messengers from the subconscious mind to the conscious mind. Okay, and this is why there's all this fascination with dream analysis. So Freud says that with proper interpretation, we can understand what these hidden messages are. And very often our dreams can inform us about things like conflicts happening with relationships and that sort of thing, our deepest fears, our desires, and even things like repressed memories, the idea that traumatic things happened to us long ago and they were so psychologically painful that we suppressed them to the point that we're not even aware of them anymore. Perhaps those can come back to us in certain types of symbols in our dreams. Okay? Okay, so Freud also says, Freud used the term id, ego, and superego. Freud says that dreams are the epitome of egocentrism. So they're literally all about you, okay? And because dreams are generated entirely within your brain, every person in your dream is either a projection of you yourself, right? Or a symbol of what that person means to you. And so dreams are totally egocentric. I used to tell my class that dreams are like onions in the sense that they have different layers. There's different layers to dreams. There's a superficial layer, and then there's a deeper understanding which involves dream analysis, dream interpretation. And so Sigmund Shlomo Freud, that was his middle name, Sigmund Freud wrote a book called The Interpretation of Dreams. It was right around the turn of the 19th to 20th century. You can actually download that as a PDF for free online if you're interested in reading that. But he talks about these layers. He talks about the manifest content of dreams and the latent content of dream. Now, the manifest content of dreams is literally what happens in the dream. Okay, so for example, a person might have a dream. Most of us have had a dream like this at some point in our life. We're in public, we look down, we're at school, we're in our underwear, and so we kind of freak out. I'm standing here, I'm naked, I'm only in my underwear. How embarrassing this is going to be when people notice it. So that would be the manifest content of the dream, the literal content. But he says the important message from our subconscious mind is not that. The important message is found in the latent content. And so that is what your nakedness would symbolize in this instance, okay? So perhaps your nakedness symbolizes something like a fear of failing, a fear of being shown to be incompetent in a certain line of work, let's say, or maybe having your secrets revealed. That would be the latent content, what your subconscious mind is really experiencing a large degree of anxiety about. So much has been written, a whole lot of ink has been spilled on dreams, dream analysis, dream interpretation, but I wanted to give you just a little bit of a flavor for that. And so again, I want to invite you to like and click and subscribe to our channel here at the Literacy Volunteers of Harrison County. My name is Dr. Rich Saplita. Thank you for joining us today.